On Thanksgiving Day, I showed up at my daughter's home unannounced and froze in place at the sight before me. My grandson sitting outside in 15 degrees weather, wearing nothing but a thin shirt and shorts. His small frame was trembling, his breath visible in the icy air. Inside, through the frosted windows, the rest of the family sat around the table, laughing, eating, basking in the glow of their warm dining room. Rage welled up inside me like wildfire. I stormed up the steps, pushed open the door without knocking, and said 6 words that drained the color from their faces. But that was only the beginning of the reckoning that would change their lives forever. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments. What time is it where you're watching from? My phone buzzed against the dashboard, a text from my neighbor, Mr. Jenkins. Police cars at the Millers again. Another domestic mess. Made me think of you and your family worries. I stared at the message as my old Chevy idled in the driveway. The Millers. Funny. My late wife, Claire, used to worry about that family too, back when she was still alive, back when there was still warmth in this world. Now it was just me, a silent house, and that gnawing feeling that something wasn't right with my daughter's marriage. The dashboard clock read 2:30 p.m. I sighed and shifted the truck into reverse. It was time. Snow had started falling an hour earlier, thick, heavy flakes that clung to everything. The radio crackled through static on the oldie station Claire and I used to love. Led Zeppelin's Kashmir hummed through the speakers, its slow, thunderous rhythm matching my mood perfectly. On the passenger seat sat 2 gift bags, one with a brand new leather baseball glove and the other filled with a few comic books, the kind my grandson, Nathan, used to love when he was little. He was 18 now, probably thought he was too grown up for them. But to me, you're never too old for heroes. Family is all we have left, Claire would always say whenever I complained about holiday visits. She'd been right then, and she was right now, even if her voice existed only in my head. The wipers groaned under the weight of snow as I drove down the rural highway. Cars ahead of me crawled with their hazard lights blinking like red fireflies in the storm. I stayed steady at 40 miles per hour. No sense arriving if I never made it there. The green exit sign for Maplewood appeared through the haze. I tried calling my daughter Laura just to let her know I was coming. The call rang 6 times, then went to voicemail. Odd. Someone was always home on Thanksgiving afternoon. A bright gas station appeared up ahead, glowing like a beacon through the falling snow. I pulled in, topped up the tank, and went inside for coffee and a bag of Nathan's favorite mints. The young clerk scanned the items and gave a sympathetic look toward the window. Roads are nasty today, sir. You heading far? Just to Brookhaven. Family dinner. Be careful, yeah? Already saw 3 wrecks today. Back in the truck, I checked the clock again. 3:05 p.m. Normally, it was a 40-minute drive to my daughter's neighborhood. Today, with the storm, it'd be closer to an hour. I thought about Nathan, maybe helping his mother with the table, or watching football with his stepfather, Rick. The boy had grown so fast. Just this summer, we'd gone fishing up at Lake Mason. He'd caught his first bass and grinned like he'd discovered buried treasure. That's when I'd noticed the bruise, a dark purple mark high on his arm. When I'd asked, he'd shrugged it off, said he fell off his bike. But something about it had bothered me. The shape, the placement, it looked too much like fingers. I should have pressed him. Claire would have known what to do. The snow thickened as I turned off the main road. Rows of 2-story homes lined the street, each decorated with pumpkins and orange lights fading under the snow's weight. Some families had already hung Christmas lights, twinkling through the white haze like defiant little stars. I slowed as I reached the cul-de-sac. There it was. My daughter's blue house with white shutters, chimney smoke curling lazily into the gray sky. Her husband's black pickup sat in the driveway beside her SUV. Everything looked peaceful, normal. I smiled faintly, picturing Nathan running out to hug me like he used to. Maybe this Thanksgiving would bring us closer again, the kind of healing Claire had always wished for. I parked behind the truck, turned off the ignition, and stepped into the bitter cold. Music drifted faintly from inside the house, laughter, conversation, clinking silverware, warmth and light behind the glass. Then I saw him. Nathan sat on the front steps, hunched over, arms wrapped around his knees. No coat, no gloves, just a thin gray shirt already stiff with frost. His shoulders were shaking, not just from cold, but from something deeper. "Jesus Christ," I muttered, slamming the truck door and running toward him. The wind sliced through me like knives. In seconds, I was kneeling beside him. His lips were blue, his fingers stiff and red. "Nathan," I said, my voice trembling as I pulled off my heavy coat and wrapped it around him. "What are you doing out here?" He looked up, relief flickering in his eyes like a dying candle. His face was pale and streaked with melted snow. "Grandpa," his voice cracked barely above a whisper. His teeth were chattering so violently he could hardly form words. I can't." I pulled him close, feeling the icy tremors through his thin shirt. "Can't what?" I asked, helping him to his feet when his knees buckled. "I'm not allowed," he stammered. His breath came out in quick clouds. "I'm not allowed to go inside." Those words cut through me like a blade. Through the windows I could see silhouettes, laughter, movement, the warm glow of dinner plates and candles. Inside that house, my family celebrated. And out here, my grandson was freezing. "What do you mean, not allowed?" My voice came out rough, angry. "This is your home." "Please, Grandpa," he whispered, his eyes darting nervously toward the door. "Please, don't make it worse for me." "If Rick hears you..." I looked at that house, really looked this time. The decorations, the soft lights, the glow that looked so perfect from afar. And then I looked back at Nathan, whose lips were turning purple. "How long have you been out here?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. He didn't answer, just stared at the snow-covered steps. "How long?" I repeated more gently. He swallowed hard. Since this morning." "This morning?" I checked my watch. 3:15 p.m. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Son, it's below freezing out here." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "He said I ruined dinner, that I don't deserve to eat with everyone." The rage that had been simmering inside me all day finally ignited. I looked at that front door, at the warmth behind it, and my fists clenched. I had come here for peace, for family, for the kind of Thanksgiving Claire would have been proud of. But what I'd found instead was cruelty wearing the mask of normalcy. And before that day was over, every person inside that house would know exactly what it feels like to be left out in the cold. You could get frostbite. I stopped myself before scaring him worse than he already was. His lips were cracked, his hands trembling uncontrollably. I tried the front door handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. They'd locked him out of his own home on Thanksgiving Day and sat inside, feasting, laughing, pretending the world was normal. "We need to get you warm," I said quietly, steering him toward my truck. "Come on, buddy, let's get you in the cab where there's heat." Even as I moved to protect him, my mind was racing, cataloging every detail. The way he flinched when I raised my voice, the fading bruises I'd seen last summer on his arms, the way he carried himself, careful, quiet, small. This wasn't a one-time punishment. This was a pattern. "Nathan," I said as I helped him climb into the passenger seat, turning the heater to full blast, "I need you to tell me what happened today." I wrapped a blanket from the emergency kit around his shoulders and rubbed warmth back into his frozen fingers. His skin felt like ice under my palms. "Talk to me, son," I said softly, forcing my voice to stay steady. "What happened this morning?" He stared at his hands, still shaking. "I was helping Mom with the turkey," he whispered. "She asked me to check it while she took a shower." His voice cracked with shame. "I forgot to turn off the oven timer when I took it out to baste it." "You forgot a timer?" The turkey got a little burnt on top, he said, glancing at me nervously. Not ruined, just darker than usual. I felt my stomach tighten. And then Rick came in and saw it. He just lost it. I clenched my jaw. Lost it how? He started yelling. Said I ruined the whole holiday, that everyone would think Mom can't cook. Said I was an embarrassment to the family. Nathan pulled the blanket tighter around him. Then he said I needed to think about my actions and that I wasn't allowed back in the house until I learned responsibility. My voice hardened. And your mother? Nathan looked away. She tried to say something, but Rick told her to stay out of it, said it was between him and me. He swallowed hard. She didn't say anything after that. I checked my watch. 3:20 p.m. Nathan, what time did this happen? Maybe around 11. 4.5 hours. He'd been outside for nearly 5 hours in 15-degree weather because a turkey had burned slightly. I took several deep breaths before I trusted myself to speak. Has this happened before? The question hung in the air between us. I saw him hesitate, fighting an inner war, weighing honesty against fear. Sometimes, he finally whispered, when I mess up. How many times, Nathan? He didn't look at me. Last month he made me sleep in the garage all night because I forgot to take out the trash. Once he locked me in the basement for 2 days because I broke one of his beer bottles. Each word felt like a knife to the gut. I looked at this boy, this gentle, decent kid who had never hurt anyone, and saw how carefully he held himself, like someone trained not to take up space. Does your mother know about this? I asked, though I already knew. She says Rick's just trying to teach me discipline, that I need to be more responsible. His voice cracked again. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am. Don't. I turned in my seat, gripping his shoulders gently but firmly. Don't you dare blame yourself. What that man is doing isn't discipline. It's abuse. And it ends today. His eyes widened in panic. No, Grandpa. Please. If you make a scene, he'll just take it out on me later. He always does. Through the windshield, I could still see the glow of the house, the laughter, the music, the smell of roasted turkey drifting through the cracks. My daughter was serving dinner to guests while her son sat outside in the freezing dark, too scared to ask for warmth. Listen to me, I said, taking his cold hands again. You're 18. You don't have to live like this anymore, and I'm not letting you. He looked terrified. But where would I go? I don't have any money. I can't afford college without them. You'll come home with me tonight. The words came out firm, final. We'll figure everything else out later. I could see the hope fighting with fear in his eyes, hope that maybe, just maybe, someone was finally going to protect him, fear that standing up for himself would only make things worse. He won't let me leave, Nathan said softly. He'll call the cops. Say I stole something, or that you're kidnapping me. I looked back toward the house, the warm lights, the laughter, and felt something cold and hard form inside me. Claire had always been the diplomatic one, the peacemaker. But she wasn't here anymore. Diplomacy hadn't protected my grandson from 4 hours in the snow. Let me worry about Rick, I said, opening the door. Right now we're getting your things. The wind hit me like a wall of knives as I stepped out into the snow. Behind me, Nathan scrambled to follow, still wrapped in my coat. The front door was locked, but I had no intention of knocking. My hands weren't trembling from the cold anymore. They were trembling with fury. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? I asked, turning to study his face more closely. The porch light revealed faint bruises along his jawline, half hidden by shadows and wind-reddened skin. I tried, he whispered. But you always talked to Mom, and she. The memory hit me hard. Last month, Nathan had called while I was fixing dinner. Grandpa, he'd said timidly, Rick says I can't eat with them anymore. Says I have to earn it. I'd laughed it off, thinking it was teenage exaggeration. When I mentioned it to Laura, she brushed it away effortlessly. Dad, you're overreacting. It's just normal discipline. Nathan's dramatic. There had been other moments too. Small warnings I'd ignored. A summer phone call where Nathan sounded exhausted. Rick yelled at me for leaving dishes in the sink, he'd said. Made me wash every plate in the house. Twice. When I'd confronted Laura, she sighed like I was being ridiculous. He's teaching him responsibility. How long has this been going on? I asked now, though part of me already knew. Nathan's voice was barely audible. Since Mom married him. 3 years. It started small, chores done twice, long lectures about respect. Then it escalated. I remembered that fishing trip last summer, how Nathan had begged to stay one more night at the lake. I thought he just liked the quiet. Now I understood. He didn't want to go home. The basement, I said slowly. You said he locked you down there? He nodded. More times than I can count. Last winter he made me sleep in the garage for forgetting to shovel the driveway. I slept in your truck on Christmas Eve when you were visiting. My chest constricted. My truck? He nodded again. He had been sleeping outside, in my truck, while I was inside laughing, thinking it was the perfect family Christmas. The guilt hit me like a punch. I looked at the house again, the golden light, the sound of laughter, the illusion of happiness. Your mother knows, I said bitterly. He nodded miserably. She says Rick's just trying to make me a better person. That I'm too sensitive, that I need to toughen up. The anger that had been simmering for months finally reached a boil. My vision sharpened, narrowed. Claire used to warn me about this temper, told me to count to 10 when I felt it coming. But counting wouldn't save my grandson tonight. I rose to my feet, still keeping him wrapped in my coat. Come on, I said, voice low and steady. We're going inside. Grandpa, no. But it was too late. The decision was made. The boy who had been locked out in the cold was coming home tonight, no matter what it cost me, or them. Please, if you make a scene, he'll just what? I turned fully toward Nathan. Make you sleep outside again? Beat you? Starve you? My voice was sharper than I intended, but the rage in my chest refused to stay buried. Son, I said, struggling to keep steady. It can't get much worse than what's already happening. Nathan's eyes flicked toward the front door, filled with fear. You don't understand how he gets when someone challenges him. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was already walking toward the house, my grandson following reluctantly behind me. The front door stood there like a symbol of everything wrong with this family. Big, polished, expensive. Rick's pride radiated from every inch of it, a monument to his control. I didn't bother knocking. My boot slammed beside the lock with everything I had. 68 years old, but decades of factory work had left me stronger than most men half my age. The wood splintered with a crack that rang through the neighborhood, and the door crashed inward, bouncing off the wall. Warm air and the scent of roasted turkey poured out, followed by silence. Thick, heavy, shocked silence. I stepped inside, Nathan close behind me, and froze. The dining room looked like a photograph out of a lifestyle magazine. A white tablecloth stretched across the polished oak table. Candles flickered, casting golden reflections on crystal glasses. Rick sat at the head of the table, carving knife in hand. Laura was beside him in a green dress I'd never seen before, her hair pinned perfectly in place. Across from them, a girl of about 10, Rick's daughter from his first marriage, sat frozen, a forkful of mashed potatoes suspended halfway to her mouth. Every one of them was still, like a painting, a perfect portrait of warmth and civility. And outside that perfect frame, my grandson had been left to freeze. The turkey glistened under the chandelier, golden, beautiful, untouched. Probably the replacement for the one Nathan had supposedly ruined. Everything looked peaceful, everything except the truth. Have you all completely lost your minds? My voice exploded through the room, deep and furious. The little girl jumped, her fork clattering onto her plate. Laura's face went pale, and the serving spoon dropped from her hand, splattering gravy across the pristine tablecloth. "Dad?" Laura's voice came out small, panicked. "What are you doing here? How?" "While you're sitting here feasting like royalty," I interrupted. "That boy was outside freezing to death." I pointed at Nathan, still wrapped in my coat, shivering despite the heat. 4 hours, Laura. 4 hours in weather that could have killed him. Rick set down his carving knife slowly and stood. He was larger than I remembered. Thick shoulders, heavy arms, probably outweighed me by 50 pounds. But I'd been in enough fights in my life to know that size means nothing when anger's on your side. "Who gave you permission to enter my house?" he said, his tone low and dangerous. "This is private property, and you're trespassing." He took a slow step forward, sizing me up like a predator measuring its prey. "Private property?" I stepped forward too. "You mean the property where you locked my grandson outside to freeze while you stuffed your face with turkey?" The little girl burst into tears, confused by the shouting. Laura reached to comfort her, but her eyes stayed locked on mine, wide, fearful, conflicted. "This is a private family matter," Rick said, his voice rising. "You have no right to be here." "No right?" My voice thundered back. "That's my grandson you nearly killed with your family matter." Behind me, Nathan pressed closer. I could feel him trembling, not from cold this time, but from fear of what was coming. This was probably the first time anyone had ever stood up to Rick in his own house, and the room itself seemed to hold its breath. The music in the background, some cheerful holiday tune about family and thankfulness, made the moment almost surreal. I pointed directly at Rick, my hand steady despite the adrenaline. "Look at him." "Look at what you've done." Rick crossed his arms, chin high, every inch the smug tyrant who believed he was justified. "The boy ruined our holiday," he said. "He needed to learn a lesson about responsibility." "A lesson?" I could hardly believe my ears. "You nearly froze him to death over a slightly burnt turkey. He's 18, not a child. My house, my rules." Rick's tone turned patronizing, every word laced with arrogance. Someone has to teach him discipline, something his mother clearly never did. Laura flinched but stayed silent, staring down at the tablecloth as if wishing she could disappear into it. "Discipline," I repeated, stepping closer until I could see the grease on his plate and the faint red stain of wine on his lips. "That's not discipline, Rick. That's abuse. And you're lucky I don't call the police right now." "Abuse?" Rick scoffed, his laugh cold and sharp. He forgot a timer and ruined a turkey. I told him to sit outside and think about his actions. That's called parenting. "For 4 hours in sub-zero weather?" I snapped. "He's exaggerating," Rick said, waving his hand dismissively. "He's fine." A little cold never hurt anyone. I looked at Nathan, his lips still tinged blue, his body trembling under the coat. "Yeah," I said, my voice trembling with controlled fury. "He looks great." "Dad, please," Laura said, her voice shaky. "Don't ruin our holiday." "We can talk about this later." "Ruin your holiday?" I turned toward her, disbelief flooding through me. "Your son was outside freezing while you were in here eating, and you're worried about me ruining your holiday?" Laura's head dropped, her voice barely audible. "Rick was just trying to teach him responsibility. Sometimes boys need firm guidance." "Firm guidance?" My voice cracked. "Laura, when you were 18 and dented my truck, did I lock you outside in a snowstorm? When you failed your math test, did I make you sleep in the garage?" "That's different," she whispered. "How?" I demanded. Rick stepped between us, his face red now, his voice raised. "Because this is my house. And Nathan isn't my biological son. I have every right to discipline him how I see fit." There it was, the truth laid bare. Nathan wasn't his blood, so Nathan didn't matter. To Rick, the boy was a burden, something to control, to punish. "You have 30 seconds to apologize to my grandson," I said quietly, my voice shaking with the effort to stay calm. 30 seconds to show you have a shred of humanity left. Rick's cold smile widened. "I don't owe that boy anything. If he doesn't like my rules, he can find somewhere else to live." The little girl was crying harder now, Laura trying to hush her while avoiding my eyes, but I wasn't looking at them anymore. All I could see was Rick's smug, unbothered face, the face of a man who thought he was untouchable. And I realized then that this wouldn't end with words. All I could think about was Nathan sitting on those steps for 4 hours, believing he deserved it. Somewhere else to live? I stepped closer, close enough to smell the sour wine on Rick's breath. "You're right about that. He is going somewhere else to live." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the keypad. The movement was deliberate, slow enough that everyone in the room could see exactly what I was about to do. Rick's smug expression faltered when he realized what it meant. "Either you apologize to my grandson right now," I said, my voice cold as steel, "or I call Child Protective Services and report you for abuse." Rick's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't dare." He stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me, but I'd faced bigger men than him before, men with worse tempers and stronger fists. I wasn't backing down from anyone who hurt my family. "Try me," I said, and started dialing. "I've got plenty to tell them about how you left an 18-year-old outside in freezing weather for 4 hours. Behind me, I felt Nathan's trembling hand grip my arm. It wasn't the cold anymore. It was fear. The kind of fear that comes from knowing that speaking up usually only makes things worse. "Dad, please." Laura finally moved, stepping between us, hands raised like she was trying to stop a bar fight. "Don't destroy our family over this." "I'm not destroying anything," I said, my eyes locked on Rick. "He did that when he decided to abuse my grandson." "Abuse?" Rick's laugh was harsh and bitter. "I was teaching him responsibility, something his weak mother never bothered to do." Laura flinched like she'd been slapped but didn't argue. She just stood there, silent, like she had so many times before. "Get out of my house, old man," Rick snapped, his voice rising. "You have no authority here. Nathan is my responsibility now." "Your responsibility?" I glanced around at the perfectly decorated dining room, the crystal glasses, the spotless china, the flickering candles, then back at Nathan's bruised face. "This is how you handle responsibility? By locking a boy outside to freeze?" The younger girl was crying again, frightened by the shouting. Laura tried to comfort her but kept looking between Rick and me like she was watching a match that might end in blood. "He's not a child," Rick barked. "He's 18. And in my house, adults who can't follow simple instructions face adult consequences." "Adult consequences," I repeated, disbelief sharpening my words. "For forgetting a timer? For being careless and destructive," Rick shot back. "For ruining our holiday and embarrassing this family in front of our guests." He gestured toward the empty chairs, the ones that had clearly been occupied earlier. It hit me then. They'd had company. People had been here, laughing, eating, celebrating, while Nathan sat outside freezing, and no one had said a word. No one had thought it strange that a boy was missing from the table. "Grandpa, let's just go," Nathan whispered behind me. "Please. I don't want to make it worse." The defeat in his voice broke something deep inside me. This boy, kind, intelligent, gentle, had been crushed so completely he thought he was the problem, that wanting warmth and kindness made him a burden. "You're not causing problems, son," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You never were." I turned back to Rick, my decision crystallizing into something cold and final. "You have 30 seconds to apologize to my grandson for what you did today." Rick crossed his arms, chin raised defiantly. "I'm not apologizing for anything. And I'm sure as hell not taking orders from some bitter old man who can't accept that his precious grandson needs discipline." "Then we're done here," I said simply. I closed the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Nathan, go get your things. You're coming home with me. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the little girl stopped crying. You can't just take him, Laura said softly, her voice trembling. Watch me. I placed a firm hand on Nathan's shoulder and guided him away from the dining table toward the stairs. Go pack whatever you need. We're leaving. Dad, you can't do this, Laura followed, panic rising in her tone. You can't just walk into our house and take my son. I can, and I am, I said without turning back, unless you'd rather I let the authorities handle it. Nathan led the way up the narrow staircase to the second floor, his steps quick and uncertain. Behind us, I could hear Rick's heavy footsteps pounding the hardwood, but I didn't turn. This is kidnapping, Rick shouted. I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. Good luck explaining to the police, I said over my shoulder, why my grandson was sitting outside in 5-degree weather for 4 hours. At the top of the stairs, Nathan led me down a short hallway to a small room at the back of the house. The space was barely large enough for a twin bed and a narrow dresser. There was no visible heat vent, and the north-facing window let in a draft that made the air icy. It looked less like a bedroom and more like storage, forgotten and unloved. This is where you sleep? I asked, scanning the cold, bare walls. Nathan nodded and started pulling clothes from the dresser, stuffing them into a worn duffel bag. Rick says the basement is for guests, he muttered, and the other room's for my sister. He didn't say our sister, just my sister. Even in his own home, he was an outsider. Take everything that matters, I said, standing guard at the doorway while he packed. We're not coming back. Nathan, please think about what you're doing. Laura appeared in the doorway, tears streaking her face. This is your home, your family. Some family, Nathan muttered, folding a faded college sweatshirt into his bag. Real families don't lock each other outside to freeze. Rick was just trying to teach you responsibility. By giving me hypothermia? Nathan's voice cracked. He looked up at her, and I saw 3 years of quiet pain etched into his eyes. Mom, he made me sleep in the garage last week because I left a glass in the sink. A glass? Laura's face twisted with disbelief. That can't be. He said it builds character, Nathan said flatly. He doesn't want me better, Mom. He wants me gone. Laura stood frozen, unable to respond. We walked past her down the staircase where Rick waited like a guard at the bottom. His face was red, his chest heaving. You leave my house, boy, he said, voice thick with fury, and don't come back. Fine by me, Nathan said, and I heard something new in his voice. Resolve. The front door still hung open from when I'd kicked it in. Cold air poured into the house, whipping through the decorations until they fluttered like dying leaves. My truck sat in the driveway, engine still running, exhaust curling in the frozen air. Nathan, Laura called out as we reached the door. Please, don't do this. I love you. He stopped and turned back to her, eyes glistening. If you loved me, Mom, he said softly, you wouldn't have let this happen. We walked to the truck in silence, breath steaming in the bitter cold. I tossed his bag into the back and helped him into the passenger seat before circling to the driver's side. Through the front window, I could see them still standing there, Laura crying, Rick red-faced and furious, the little girl peeking out from behind the wall. You ready? I asked, shifting the truck into reverse. I've been ready for 3 years, Nathan said quietly, pulling my coat tighter around himself. As we backed out onto the snow-covered street, the radio hummed softly, classic rock, the same song that had been playing when this nightmare began. The heater filled the cab with warmth, and for the first time that day, Nathan looked like he could breathe again. Thank you, Grandpa, he whispered. I didn't answer. I just nodded, keeping my eyes on the road ahead. We were done with that house, and whatever came next, at least he'd never have to face another Thanksgiving alone on the front steps again. I can't believe you came for me, Nathan said quietly as we turned onto the main road toward the highway. I should have come sooner, I said, meaning every word. I should have seen what was happening. I tried to tell you, he said softly, but I didn't know how. We drove in silence for a few miles, the kind of silence that carried weight, not awkwardness. The road hummed beneath the tires, snowflakes streaking across the windshield like ghosts. That familiar sense of family duty settled on my shoulders, heavy but steady, like one of Claire's old quilts. Nathan needed protection. He needed space to breathe, to heal, to grow into the man he was meant to be. Tell me about college, I said as we merged onto I-75 North. What are you studying? Engineering. His voice sounded stronger when he talked about school. Mechanical engineering, like you used to do at the factory. I smiled faintly, like grandfather, like grandson. For a moment, the pain eased. I could almost hear Claire laughing in the passenger seat, proud of the boy sitting beside me. We'll figure out the tuition, I told him. Don't worry about that. Grandpa, I don't want to be a burden. Son, I said firmly, you're not a burden. You're family. And family takes care of each other. By the time we reached my neighborhood, the snow had thinned into a light flurry. My modest ranch house came into view, small, weathered, but warm and alive. The porch light glowed against the darkness like a promise. Home sweet home, I said, helping Nathan carry his bag to the front door. The key turned easily in the lock, and warmth spilled out to greet us. The faint scent of coffee and Claire's lavender sachets still lingered in the air. The place wasn't much, worn furniture, faded carpet, but it was ours, paid for, and full of memories that mattered. You remember where the guest room is? I asked as we stepped inside. Yeah, Nathan said with a tired smile. Down the hall, next to your room. It's warm in here, he murmured, his voice full of relief. The thermostat's always set to 72, I said, smiling. Your grandmother used to say life's too short to be cold in your own home. I showed him to the guest room, simple, comfortable, and familiar. A double bed covered in one of Claire's quilts, a dresser, a small reading chair. Family photos lined the walls, birthdays, fishing trips, Claire holding Nathan as a baby. Seeing him in that room again felt right. For the first time since Claire passed, the house felt alive. I'll get some dinner started, I said. Nothing fancy, just chicken and vegetables. Can I help? Nathan asked, eager. Sure, I said. But remember, this isn't a job. This is your home now. We moved around the kitchen like we had 100 times before. I thawed chicken in the microwave while Nathan washed vegetables. Slowly, the day's tension began to melt off him. His shoulders loosened, his eyes softened. Tell me more about what's been going on, I said, seasoning the chicken. Start from the beginning. When your mother married Rick. Nathan hesitated, then sighed. It started small. Comments about how I loaded the dishwasher wrong, leaving my shoes in the wrong spot. Then it got bigger. How much bigger? He controls everything, Nathan said quietly. When I eat. What I eat. When I can shower, when I can use the phone, I stopped seasoning and gripped the counter. He made Mom choose between him and me, Nathan continued, voice trembling. And she chose him. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? Last Christmas, when you visited. Remember how quiet I was? I nodded slowly. Rick told me I wasn't allowed to talk unless someone asked me a direct question, Nathan said. And Mom just sat there. Didn't say a word. The memory hit like a punch. I'd thought Nathan was just being withdrawn, a typical teenager. I'd even joked about it later to Claire. Said kids these days didn't know how to hold a conversation. Why doesn't your mother stand up to him? I asked. She's scared, he said, chopping carrots with precise mechanical motions. She told me once that if she leaves him, she'll lose the house. She can't afford to raise us alone. I slid the chicken into the oven and moved to the fireplace. The act of crumpling newspaper, stacking kindling, and lighting a flame helped calm my thoughts. Come sit by the fire, I said once it was burning strong. Tell me something good. About school, your friends. We settled into the chairs by the fire, its warm glow soft against the room's shadows. For the first time all day, Nathan smiled. I made the dean's list last semester, he said, and my friend Jake's teaching me to play guitar. I nodded toward a framed photo on the mantel, Claire at 20, laughing, holding a guitar. She used to say music was the language of the soul, I said. I remember her saying that, Nathan murmured. He looked at her photo a long moment. I miss her. Me too, son, I said quietly. We talked while the chicken baked, about school, about life, about how to rebuild from broken things. When we finally sat down to eat, the room was full of something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Across the table, Nathan looked different. The fear in his eyes had been replaced with something stronger. Hope. We'll call your college tomorrow, I said. Sort out your financial aid. Maybe get you a part-time job if you want one. You don't have to do all this for me. Yes, I do, I said firmly. That's what family does. The phone rang just as we were finishing dessert, leftover pie I'd found in the freezer. The sound cut through the warmth like a blade. Nathan froze, his hand trembling around his coffee mug. I looked at the caller ID and felt my stomach tighten. Laura. Before I could decide whether to answer, 3 sharp knocks hit the front door. Not polite knocks, authoritative ones, the kind that demand obedience. Nathan's eyes went wide. He nearly dropped his mug. Stay behind me, I said, standing and setting my cup down carefully. The knocking came again, louder this time, followed by muffled voices outside, more than one. I switched on the porch light and looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers stood on my doorstep, and behind them, like predators waiting for the right moment to strike, stood Rick and Laura. Mr. Burke, the lead officer called out, voice steady but authoritative. Police, we need to speak with you. I took a slow breath and opened the door, keeping my body angled just enough to block their view of Nathan. What can I do for you, officers? I asked calmly. Rick wasted no time. He stepped forward, jabbing a finger toward me like a prosecutor in a courtroom. Officer, this man kidnapped my stepson. He broke into our home and dragged the boy away without permission. The lead officer, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, lifted his hand to quiet him. Sir, let's take this one step at a time. He turned to me. Mr. Burke, is there a young man named Nathan Burke here? Yes, I said plainly. My grandson is here. He kidnapped him. Rick's voice rose, full of fake outrage, broke down our door like some criminal and took the boy from his family. Is the young man here voluntarily? The second officer asked, pulling out a small notepad. Before I could answer, Nathan appeared beside me, still wrapped in the blanket from the couch. His voice was quiet, but clear. I want to stay with my grandpa. Rick's face turned red. You see? He shouted. He's been filling the boy's head with lies, turning him against his own mother. What lies? I stepped forward, my voice steady but sharp. The truth? The truth about how you left him outside in freezing weather for 4 hours? The truth about how you've been abusing him for 3 years? Abuse? Rick laughed, but it came out hollow. I was teaching him responsibility. The boy ruined our entire Thanksgiving dinner and needed to learn there are consequences for his actions. The first officer exchanged a weary look with his partner, the look of men who had seen too many family disasters to count. Mr. Burke, he said finally, we're going to need everyone to come inside so we can discuss this properly. I stepped back, allowing them in. The warmth of the house felt heavier now, tainted by tension. Rick followed immediately, Laura trailing behind him, eyes downcast. She looked smaller somehow, a woman reduced by the weight of her own silence. All right, the officer said, flipping open his notebook. Let's start from the beginning. Mr. Burke, you claim this man kidnapped your stepson? Absolutely, Rick said, straightening up like he was taking the stand. His tone was polished, the fake calm of a man who'd rehearsed this lie. I came home to find the front door broken and Nathan gone. Neighbors said they saw an older man forcing him into a truck. Forcing? I said, incredulous. Officer, I rescued my grandson from abuse. That's what he keeps saying, Rick added, shaking his head sadly. But the truth is, he's never approved of my marriage to his daughter. He's been waiting for an excuse to cause trouble. The officer turned to Nathan, who was standing close to me, trembling. Son, did this man force you to come here? No, sir, Nathan said softly. He saved me. Saved you from what? The officer asked. Nathan looked nervously at Rick, then back at the officer. From freezing to death on the porch. The second officer looked up sharply. Explain that. I accidentally burned the turkey this morning, Nathan said. Rick made me sit outside to think about my actions. I was out there for over 4 hours in 5-degree weather. He's exaggerating, Rick said quickly. It was maybe an hour, and he was dressed warmly. An hour? I scoffed. Officer, my grandson was sitting out there in a thin shirt and jeans when I arrived at 3:15. He'd been there since 11 a.m. The first officer's eyes narrowed. Sir, is it true you made the young man sit outside as punishment? Briefly, Rick said, his voice suddenly less sure. But he's twisting the story. Sometimes teenagers need firm discipline in freezing temperatures, the officer asked. Rick's confidence cracked slightly. Look, his mother and I agreed. Mom didn't agree to anything, Nathan interrupted, his voice stronger now. She just didn't stop you. All eyes turned to Laura. She stood by the doorway, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, eyes fixed on the floor. Ma'am, the officer said gently, what's your version of events? Laura looked trapped, like a woman standing at the edge of a cliff. Whatever she said next would decide everything. She looked from Rick's hard stare to Nathan's pleading eyes, and her hands began to shake. Mrs. Burke, the officer urged softly, please, we need to know what really happened today. Rick shifted closer, looming over her like a shadow. Tell them, honey, he said in that smooth, menacing tone. Tell them how your father's been poisoning Nathan against us. The officer noticed it immediately. Sir, please step back and let your wife speak. Laura's voice came out small, almost breaking. Nathan did burn the turkey this morning. And, the officer prompted. And Rick was upset, she whispered. Her eyes darted to her husband's, then away. He said Nathan needed to learn responsibility by sitting outside, in the cold. The officer nodded slowly. For how long? Laura's lips trembled. Since about 11, until my father arrived, around 3:15. The officer scribbled notes. So over 4 hours. In 5-degree weather, she's making it sound worse than it was, Rick snapped. He could have come inside any time, if he'd just apologized. No, he couldn't, Laura said suddenly, her voice louder, steadier. You locked the door. You told me not to let him in no matter what. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Rick's face went pale, then flushed crimson. Laura, he hissed, what are you doing? I'm telling the truth. Her voice cracked, but her resolve didn't. She turned to the officers, tears gathering in her eyes. For once in 3 years, I'm telling the truth. The lead officer leaned forward. Mrs. Burke, has this kind of punishment happened before? Yes. The word came out like a dam breaking. He's made Nathan sleep in the garage, in the basement. He's locked him out overnight. Her voice grew stronger with every word. He controls everything. When Nathan can eat, when he can shower, when he can speak at the dinner table. Laura, shut up, Rick barked, his mask shattering completely. You have no idea what you're doing. You'll destroy everything we've built. She turned on him with fury that had been buried for years. What we've built? What have we built except fear and misery? She pointed toward Nathan. Look at him, Rick. Look at what you've done to my son. I saw it in Nathan's face, the years of self-blame melting away as his mother finally stood up for him. The lead officer stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back." "This is ridiculous." Rick backed toward the door. "You're going to arrest me based on the lies of a bitter old man and his unstable daughter?" "Based on multiple corroborating statements and clear evidence of child endangerment," the officer replied calmly. "You have the right to remain silent." Rick's face twisted with rage as they cuffed him. "You'll regret this, Laura," he spat. "You'll lose everything. The house, the money. You'll be nothing without me." Laura's voice broke, but her words were steady. "I'd rather have nothing than watch you hurt my son again." The door closed behind the officers and their prisoner, leaving only silence, deep and heavy. Laura collapsed into the nearest chair and started to cry, not the quiet tears she used to hide, but real, raw sobs that came from years of pain finally released. Nathan rushed to her side, kneeling beside her chair. "Mom," he whispered, "it's okay." "It's over now. I'm so sorry," she choked out through tears. "I should have protected you." Nathan wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time in years, they held each other without fear. And as the fire crackled softly in the corner, I realized something. Justice doesn't always come from the system. Sometimes it comes from finally telling the truth. 4 months later, the morning sun streamed through my kitchen window as Laura flipped pancakes on the griddle. Nathan sat at the table, grinning as he reread the acceptance letter from his dream university. "Full scholarship," he said for the 10th time that week, still shaking his head in disbelief. "They're actually paying me to go to school." "That's what happens when you're brilliant and persistent," Laura said, sliding a stack of pancakes onto his plate. She looked different now, stronger, freer. The part-time job at the local library had given her the independence she never had before, and the divorce settlement had helped her start over on her own terms. "Your grandmother would have been proud," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. The kitchen buzzed with warmth and laughter, the kind that had been missing since Claire passed away. Laura had moved in permanently after Rick's conviction. The guest room was now hers, and we'd turned the basement into Nathan's new space, not a punishment cell, but a real bedroom, with heating, soft light, and a window that opened to morning air. "Dad," Laura said as she sat beside me, "are you sure you don't mind us staying here indefinitely?" "I know you've gotten used to your independence." "Independence is overrated," I said with a smile. "Family's what matters. Besides, who else is going to make sure Nathan doesn't burn the house down when he tries to cook?" "That was one time," Nathan laughed. "And the fire was very small." The phone rang and Laura answered cheerfully. "Burke residence." "Oh, hi, Jake. Yes, he's here. Guitar practice at 4? Sure, I'll tell him." She hung up and turned to us. "Your friend Jake wants to know if you're still practicing for the talent show." "The talent show?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You didn't mention anything about that." "It's nothing big," Nathan said, smiling shyly. "Jake and I are doing an acoustic set, a couple of classic rock songs, ones you'd probably know." "Well, I'll be in the front row," I promised. After breakfast, I found Laura in the living room, arranging new family photos along the mantel beside the old pictures of Claire. There was one from Nathan's high school graduation, the ceremony we'd missed during the chaos with Rick. Another from our fishing trip last month, and one from Christmas morning, our first real Christmas together in years. "Any word from Rick?" I asked quietly, though part of me hoped there wasn't. "His lawyer called yesterday," Laura said without looking up. "Apparently the anger management therapy is going well. But he lost his job at the supermarket. He's moving back to Cleveland to live with his sister." "Good," I said simply. "The farther away, the better." She sighed softly. "Sometimes I feel sorry for him. But then I remember what he did to Nathan, and the feeling disappears pretty fast." That afternoon, while Nathan was at guitar practice, Laura and I worked in the garden behind the house, preparing the soil for Claire's old vegetable patch. Spring had come early that year, and there was something hopeful about planting seeds again, about watching life return to the earth after so much cold. "Dad," Laura said, pulling weeds with calm focus, "I still don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't come that day—" You don't need to thank me," I interrupted gently, turning over a stubborn clump of dirt. "I just did what any grandfather would do." "No," she said quietly. "You didn't. You risked everything to save him. You could have been arrested, charged with kidnapping. But I wasn't," I said, standing straight and smiling faintly. "Truth has a funny way of winning out in the end." Laura smiled through the sunlight. "Mom used to say that too." "She was a smart woman," I said, brushing soil from my hands. "Smarter than me, anyway." That evening, we fell into our quiet routine, dinner together, then whatever game show or movie happened to be on. It wasn't glamorous, but it was exactly what we all needed. Predictable, peaceful, safe. Nathan sat in the corner, guitar in hand, softly practicing chords. Laura worked on a crossword puzzle. I read the newspaper. Simple things, normal things, that had once felt impossible. "Grandpa," Nathan said suddenly during a commercial break, setting his guitar aside, "I've been thinking about changing my major." "From engineering?" I asked. "To what?" "Maybe social work. Or counseling." He looked at me seriously. "I want to help other kids who've gone through what I did." A quiet pride filled my chest, the kind that steals your breath before you even realize it. "That's a fine goal, son," I said softly. "Your grandmother always said the best way to heal from pain is to help others avoid it." "She really said that?" he asked. "She did," I smiled, along with about 1,000 other things I wish I'd listened to sooner. Later, as the evening settled in and Laura dozed in her chair, Nathan and I stepped outside to the back porch. The stars were bright and cold above us, but nothing like that freezing Thanksgiving night when I'd found him half-conscious on Rick's doorstep. "Ready for fishing season to start?" I asked. He grinned. "Can't wait." "Think we'll catch anything bigger than last year?" "With your luck," I teased. "We'll probably catch a whale." We both laughed, standing side by side. 2 generations of Burkes who'd found their way back to each other through pain, truth, and love. Soon Nathan would leave for college. He'd build his own life, his own family someday. But now, his foundation was solid, built not on fear, but on strength and honesty. "Grandpa," he said quietly as we turned to go back inside. "Yeah?" "Thank you, Ty, for coming to get me, and for being worth saving." I looked at him, my throat tight. "You did the saving, son. I just showed up." The house glowed warmly as we locked up for the night. 3 people who had learned that family isn't just blood. It's showing up when it matters most. It's telling the truth when it hurts. It's protecting the people you love, no matter the cost. Claire would have been proud of all of us. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.